I'd like to think I get my share of popular authors and entrepreneurs, but wait until you meet today's guest. Matthew Turner has interviewed hundreds of successful entrepreneurs, authors, investors, and thought leaders, and interviewing them is one thing, but pulling actual relatable lessons is a whole other thing. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk. We'll figure out some of these lessons he's learned and how they might help you.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Okay, so we're sitting down with Matthew Turner, British author, written and published 4 books. But then the moment was right, and he wrote his latest book, Beyond the Pale. Now, Matthew brings relatable fables for those looking to live meaningful and purpose-driven lives. And I was looking over his bio, and it includes writing for himself, ghostwriting for others, writing both articles and books for other successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders, and in between, spending time with his 2 children. You are a busy man, sir. Nice to have you on the show. Welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. A real pleasure.
I hope so. Well, let's see how we do by the time we get to the end. Sometimes I can be a little annoying, but I'll be on my best behavior with you. You have an appetite for activity. I mean, I saw that just looking at your bio, and I'm a man who has a few activities myself. But as we get into these various activities, there's always lessons. And sometimes I think, boy, I wish I could just go back into the Wayback Machine and visit a very young Rob Jollis and tell him a few things. So what do you wish you had known when you started out?
It's a very good question. And wouldn't it have been lovely if we could always go back and visit our younger self and give him a few lessons along the way? I mean, there's a lot. And if I specifically go back to when I first left my job, which is, I want to say like 8 or 9 years ago. It's hard to fathom it was that long, but I think it was 8 or 9 years. And I decided to work for myself. I would have said to him, hold back, maybe leave the job that I had because it wasn't really a good fit, but get a part-time job, maybe work something else and just start what you're wanting to do on the side. And I say that because I spent the next few years what I call wandering in the wilderness. I didn't have a concrete, clear idea of what I wanted to be. And more importantly, what impact I was going to have on those I served. I didn't understand who I was going to serve. I had a bit of an idea. I had a bit of an idea of what I could do. Maybe this, maybe that. And I ended up saying yes to too many things, trying my hand at too many things, becoming a master of nothing, ultimately. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, whether that was similar to how kind of you started, but yeah, if I could go back to a younger self when I first started, I would have said, don't be in a rush to work for yourself and to prove anything to anyone. Get that part-time job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I would need you to visit me too. It's funny. It's sort of instinct versus logic. The instinct is to, as you kind of said, have your hands in a whole lot of different things. But logic states that what we want to do is really perfect something, really almost the way a company brands themselves. It can't be everything to everybody. So who exactly are you? It's the same with us when we're trying to figure out ourselves. Now, that younger self of you and me, it's in all fairness, and we'll give ourselves a bit of a break. It's hard to know when you're in your 20s. At least for me, it was, and I think that's what the 20s are about. But I liked what you said, just in terms of just kind of staying put. I always thought that it was a lack of courage to not stand up for yourself. As I got older, and maybe you agree or disagree with this, but I realized that it actually took more courage, in a sense, not to stand up for yourself. In other words, there's a time and a place to stand up, but to resist the temptation to be that hero and really tell that manager or that boss what's for. What do you think about that? Is that something that you take pride in when you spoke up, or is it something that you wish you may have held back on a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance. I think you need to obviously stand up for yourself. You need to have conviction. I think that's important. It's a strong moral value, but it doesn't mean you're brave. It doesn't mean you're courageous. It doesn't mean you're strong. It doesn't mean you're the big man. If you always have something to say, if you're always, well, you've got to pick your battles. You've got to, I think respect is a big thing. You've got to respect yourself, but you've got to respect others. And you've just got to appreciate that at no point in your life do you know everything. I've written about this before. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. That's because in truth, you never are. And if you are, then you're definitely in the wrong room. But a lot of times I think we stand up for ourselves just purely out of ego. And it's because we're not open to learning. And especially when you're working for someone else, be it a client, and you work for yourself, you're self-employed or whatever, or whether it's more of a 9-to-5 job, there's always got to be that appreciation that you can learn off everyone, whether they're younger or older, more experienced or not. And just having that appreciation to step back, to listen, to reflect, and to listen to understand. It can be huge. And a lot of the times that ego gets in the way. It forces you to push too fast, too soon, to go too bigger than you need to. And yeah, I definitely was guilty of that. I suppose throughout all my life, but definitely when I was transitioning away from Matthew, the guy with a job, to Matthew, okay, I'm now in charge of myself. I'm self-employed. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to write my own books. I was trying to prove something to someone, but really it was just trying to prove something to myself. And all I ended up doing was wasting time and money and wandering around chasing shadows.
Well, I'm going to jump into those shadows in a second, but I want anybody who's listening right now, if you got a piece of paper, I want you to write down one word. And if you're driving in your car, you can't, I want you to remember one word you just heard. He said it twice, and that is ego. And there it is. That's really the litmus test. And I'm really glad you articulated that, because it's hard to just say, so I learned never to stand up for myself. That's not the message. That's not what I'm trying to get across. And I know it's not what you're trying to get across. It's perhaps separating the ego part of that with the reality. And I really like that line, and I know I circled it, and I appreciate that. So let's stay there. I'm a former Xerox guy, and so we like to process things. We like things that are repeatable and predictable. So right now, actually, we have one piece that maybe we'll put out there and just say, when you're struggling with management, when you're struggling with whether this is the job for you, maybe it's your turn to be an entrepreneur, but when you're struggling, keep an eye that ego isn't making that decision for you. But back to you, Matthew, what I'm looking for, maybe one or two concrete lessons that we could circle. We're working on a pad of paper with you. Okay. So I got ego circled. Give me one or two lessons that you learned somewhere in the journey that had maybe the biggest impact on you, on your career or even your life.
I want to circle one for you right now. One, because it touches on something we've already mentioned, or something you touched upon, and I wanted to circle back to it because it's so important. And another, because it's very much linked to my latest book, Beyond the Pale. And it's the birth of my daughter, who's my youngest, Imogen. She actually just had her 3rd birthday 2 weeks ago, which is insane to think, because I came up with the idea for Beyond the Pale around about 2 or 3 months before we learned of Imogen. So the idea of Beyond the Pale is almost 4 years old. And to think that it's not quite published yet, it's just, wow, the last few years have flown by. So it's a huge thing for me, because I'm like, wow, where have the last 4 years gone? But the reason it's a huge learning curve for me is this period when I learned about Imogen was coming into the world. Because during this time, I was doing better than I was in the early days. I'd started to establish much to myself, but I was still ultimately saying yes too much. I was still trying to be too much to too many people. I wouldn't just work on one book. I'd have a fiction book and a non-fiction book. I wouldn't just work with clients solving problem A. I would also say, sure, I can do that too. Oh, sure, I can do that too. And I was just saying yes to too many things. I was trying to be too many things. And I wasn't going a mile deep. And one of the people who appears in the Beyond the Pale is AJ Leon. Huge inspiration of mine is AJ, great guy. And when I was interviewing him a couple of years ago for the book, he talked about how he couldn't understand when this business is trying to serve 1 billion users. Because when you're trying to serve so many people, you can only ever go an inch deep with it. He would rather go a mile deep with a few rather than an inch deep with a many. And my entire ethos of life during this period had ultimately just to try and go an inch deep with as many people as I could. Rather than committing, rather than having that belief in myself, rather than becoming a master at something and going a mile deep. But then Imogen came on the scene. And my partner and I at the time, we were just starting to think about moving out, getting our own place. And Imogen just fast-tracked everything. And I was already a father at this point, but I wasn't with George's mother. It's all I'd ever known. We'd kind of got a good routine going, but I knew that suddenly I was going to have to up my game. I was no longer going to be able to just work 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, wake up in the morning and start working while still in bed. I had to have my working load, but I had to earn probably 2, 3 times as much as I was consistently. And I just realized I was in the hustle. I just realized I was totally ineffective with how I was using my time, who I was working with, what I was working on. I was just doing too much. So Imogen came on the scene, just forced me to question everything. Not just as a person like fatherhood does, but specifically how I was going to provide. And I knew that I was going to have to work less, work more focused on a deep level. I go a mile deep rather than scratch the surface, and really truly embrace the less is more lifestyle, which I'd already kind of always talked about and said, yeah, I prefer less is more, but I never really did it. And it was this period which opened my eyes to it, made me properly believe, like, okay, yeah, you're saying one thing, but you're doing another. And it's time to commit, become a master. And yeah, it's changed a whole lot for me. And it changed the type of people I worked, the type of work I was doing. And yeah, to say I've grown a lot, both in terms of business and personally over the last 3-4 years, is an understatement.
That's very interesting. And the 2 things you said sort of link up a little bit. You're talking about relationships. You're talking about going an inch deep. It's easy to go an inch deep. It really is. It's hard work when even in the conversations that we have when we're being interviewed, you and I. The first question's easy. The second and third, where we go deeper than an inch. Okay, those are the ones that require work. That's where the sweat's involved, and it sort of links up to being a master. We can be good at things. Being a master is really hard. I struggle with the guitar. I've it's one of my failings in life. I've just never really put the time in. But when I used to hear people say that, well, to learn a song, maybe you can, I forgot the number, but it's like 1,000 hours or something to really learn a song well. I remember thinking that's impossible. But yet, do you want to be a master? Or do you want to just, play around with the guitar a little bit? I just think that's really interesting. Let's stay on one topic though. I brought up Beyond the Pale. You brought up Beyond the Pale. Let's just take a moment and talk about that for a second. First of all, has it been published or is it going to be published?
So it's being published by Morgan James in August 2021. So depending on when you're listening to this, it may or may not be out.
Okay.
The ebook will be available in May. So at the time of recording this, it's with the publisher. I'm literally waiting for my first author copies to arrive, hopefully in the next week or 2, which is very exciting.
Very exciting.
But yeah, it's coming. It's coming soon. It'll be in the bookstores and everything. And yeah, I'm very excited to bring this book to life. I'm proud of all my books, but this one's a little bit different for sure.
Yeah. Well, and this will be number 5 for you, right?
Yeah. which
Yeah.
is crazy.
All right. Now they're like your children. So you got to,
Yeah,
you can't like one more than the other, but we all know
that's right.
some of our kids do better than others. Okay. So, but our job is to give them the best chance at a good life that we can. And so I know you'll be out there pushing that book. We'll be certainly. Will we be able to get it here at Amazon in the States?
Yeah, it'll be. I'm actually working with an American publisher, so it'll be on Amazon and in the brick and mortar stores, like your Barnes and Nobles and everything. Hopefully, they'll still be around come the summer. With everything that's happened during the pandemic, I'm hoping bookstores make it. So yeah, it's getting traditionally published. It'll be in all good bookstores, and yeah, Amazon, obviously.
Beautiful. Okay. So we've talked about something that, your journey, biggest impacts. Tell me about something that, let's flip that question a little bit. Something that's that you haven't succeeded at, something that there are a lot of people that want to write books. A lot of people want to do what you've done. So they look at a guy like you and they go, he doesn't know from failure. But I've never met an entrepreneur, particularly a successful one, who hasn't failed at something or other. Give us something that you failed at, maybe a lesson you learned from it.
Well, the thing that comes to mind is very much linked to what we've already been talking about. This idea of scratching the surface or only going an inch deep. I failed massively for that for several years, just not earning as much as I could have done, but at the same time delaying the inevitable. I was trying to be, a marketer, marketing consultant, a coach, and then a speaker. I was writing too many different types of books, committing myself, just spreading myself too thin. I think it's in one of Tolkien's book, isn't it? The spread yourself thin on like butter on bread, and you spread yourself too thin. And I just found myself, unfortunately, subconsciously caught up inside the hustle. And that's a huge thing for me these days. That Beyond the Pale, if I was to, describe it in a sentence, it's a book about the anti-hustle. I'm very much committed these days to the anti-hustle because I feel we are caught up as a society these days with this glorifying of the hustle. And I realized going back 3 or 4 years ago, and still today to an extent, that I drift in to the hustle. I've never been one of these people who glorifies it, all-nighters, working the hardest, grinding the gears. I've never been that guy. But go back 3 or 4 years, I was the guy who was waking up at 7 o'clock and I was on my laptop in bed. And I was the guy who was staying in the coffee shop until close time at 7 o'clock in the evening. And I was the guy who was coming home and more evenings than not, doing something at 9 o'clock at night, doing an interview, doing a call, saying yes to this person, saying yes to that person. And there are times when you need to, for instance, when you've got a book coming out or a project to complete. But when you're constantly doing that, it just becomes the norm. And you normalize this idea of always being on. And if you're always on, then you're always connected to your work. And if you're always connected to your work, you're able to justify this idea of saying yes. So someone says, oh, could you be a coach? Yeah, I could be a coach. I don't know how to be a coach. I don't particularly want to be a coach, but I could coach. I could figure it out. I'll say yes. Oh, do you do speaking? Well, I've never really done any speaking before, but yeah, that sounds good. Everyone else who is in my space does speaking. So yeah, I can do speaking. I'll do that. I'll do a presentation. Oh, do you do freelancing? Yeah, I can do freelancing. Oh, do you do this? And that was where I was at. And that's where I was failed because I was not earning the kind of money that I am today because I wasn't a master at anything. I wasn't able to say to a client like, no, this is what I do. This is what I don't do, but what I do is good. So this is what I charge. I'm able to justify it because I've got all these other clients who are happy with it, yada, yada, yada. And I'm able to go deep now with the work that I do because I don't work as much. So I've got more energy and I'm more structured with my day and all of these things. So the biggest failure that I've done over the recent years was just inadvertently getting sucked into the hustle-scape, just getting stuck in the hustle culture that is out there. And it just led me to say yes and yes and yes.
Now,
I was too afraid to ever say no, and
yeah,
it was toxic.
will we learn this from the Beyond the Pale? Is this the kind of thing that you're covering in there? Because this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so Beyond the Pale is it's a business fable.
Mhm.
It's a work of fiction. So the best way I can describe it is it's like The Alchemist. It's a novel, so it's fiction, but it's not written as a pure form of escapism or entertainment. There's a big message behind it, and there's a lot of non-fiction elements coming through. I interviewed real people who appear in the book. It's a fictional tale set in the real world, and the overarching message for the entire book is this notion of hustle, striding and pursuing a version of success that you think you need based on society, based on the media, based on your parents, based on the school system, based on just what you assumed you want from life. But then actually questioning this. And so the lead character, Ferdinand, a very typical success story, assumed he was living life, assumed he was on the right path, assumed he was happy. But then when people started asking him a few questions, he started peeling away the layers, he realized, I'm actually not that happy. I've actually been self-sabotaging inadvertently for the last few years. And he starts to realize he's caught in this hustle. He's caught in this pursuit of happiness and success, which means nothing to him. So he goes on a journey to figure out what the hell he wants from life, what he actually wants to do, what he wants to go a mile deep in, who he wants to be. So this notion of hustle, escaping it, being conscious of your personal role in it, is fundamental in the book. It's there, throughout the entire journey.
Yeah, I will tell you that shaking me up a little bit because I'm born and bred on the concept of hustle. But I will tell you, if you don't mind me just changing the semantics just a little bit, just so guys like me can hear it. Uh, you know, I fell into a trap of, I was working the corporate life and doing all that. And Xerox put me on the great road a great deal. I went my last year at Xerox, I was on travel 247 nights. Um, and, I wasn't all that upset about it. It was my family that was upset about it. It was those that really cared for me and loved me that were upset about it. So whether that was hustle or just almost workaholicism, I got caught up into it, and it almost cost me my marriage. And this is a common tale for a lot of people that, and we'll put it back into your language, that maybe get a little bit caught up in that hustle. And I will tell you that I'm looking forward to reading the book because uh, I know that for me, I actually went to an AA website and actually began to approach my condition as almost the way an alcoholic would approach it. Of first I was in denial, and then I was angry, and then I began to bargain. And but the reality was, thank goodness I had somebody who was keeping an eye on me for my anti-hustle, who called my wife, who really sort of sat me down and said, without using the words, but if you had been there, the words have been, "You're mistaking the word hustle, Rob. You're mistaken.
Yeah.
You're missing a lot of things. My hustle was that laptop at 7 a.m. My hustle was on the road." And I guess the last thing I'll say, I'll turn it back over to you, is it's an interesting concept, Matthew, because it's most of us are not raised to climb the ladder, but not too high. Climb the ladder, but let go of that rung. And you know what? Take a step back on that ladder. Who's writing to that? And so many people get into so much trouble because they don't understand what you're referring to as the anti-hustle. I just think it's very important.
You raised two really important points there. One, you only know what you know. You get brought up a certain way. And no matter who your parents are, the society as a whole kind of brings you up to work hard, to climb the ladder. It says success is this, it's this car, it's this house, it's this job title, it's this salary. And it's all programmed into, I mean, just think about the school system. You're rewarded for studying hard. Not necessarily the best results, not about finding the most effective way. It's about just completing the homework. It's about doing what you're supposed to do. So you're brought up to work hard. It's not about working smart. It's not about even developing a good work ethic. It's just about working hard. And that's how most people are brought up. The other thing that you brought up, you said addiction.
Yeah.
And I haven't really thought about it like this before. And so you've said it, and it's made me realize, like, when you think about addiction, most of the time, the really toxic addictions are where you're not even aware of it. It just becomes habitual. And they talk about it in addiction, you've got to admit it to yourself. It doesn't matter whether other people are pointing it out. So to you, it's just normal. It's like, I'm not addicted. I just like it. It's just something that I do. And that's kind of like my point. It's not, when I talk about hustle, that I'm anti-hard work. It's not about, oh, anyone who works beyond 7 p.m. doesn't care about their family or is stuck in a hustle. It's a very loose term, but it's this idea of just being, to an extent, addicted to avoidance, addicted to a form of escapism, addicted to being switched on and connected in the pursuit of fill in blank, proving it to yourself, proving it to other people. Once I reach X, I'll be happy, I'll be content. But we all know that it doesn't work like that. If you achieve $1 million, you'll then want to achieve 10 million and then 100 million. If you strive to become a CEO, then it won't be enough. You want to be a CEO at a bigger company. So whenever you're pursuing something like that, it's just a never-ending tale. And it's a form of addiction. You just have to be switched on, because if you're not switched on, then what is the alternative? And most people, and I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of people will get addicted. It's a form of escapism, and it just allows them to escape their own head. It allows them to escape their own situation. It allows them to escape their own feelings. It's just a form of numbness. I'll take that drug to numb the pain. I'll take that drink to numb the pain. I'll work harder and harder and harder, and I will just commit myself to my work so I don't have to listen to that inner voice. So I don't have to face those inner demons. And that's my kind of problem. And because of the world we live in, social media, the amazing tool that it is, the internet, the incredible tool that it is, we're always connected to other people. I can log onto my phone and scroll and get a peek, an edited peek, into 100 different lives in the space of 5 minutes. And I will either consciously or subconsciously compare my situation to theirs, or what I presume their situation is. And I'll just be like, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I need to work harder. So it reinforces, it's just a loop, that loop. And it just forces you to work harder and harder. And for me, it's a genuine issue that isn't just part of the corporate world. It isn't just about the online world. It's part of society, and it stems from this idea of very few people appreciate what success means to them. Very few people are pursuing a version of success, a version of happiness, a version of purpose that actually means something to them.
Yeah, I will tell you that in my office here, I believe, as a corporate trainer, I always believe, if you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing. So I really only have one little piece right below my monitor here as I speak to you today. And that is the piece that says, we weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference. And that helps keep me grounded. And I think that's allowed me to sort of navigate what's hustle, what's hard work. It kind of begins to sum up a little bit of the messages that you brought for us here today. But it's a very simple message I keep there, because I was the guy that was hung up. I'm a very competitive person. So I was hung up on, beating my competition and whatever monetary figure I had last year. Well, by golly, we're going to knock that one on its side. That's also coming up as a salesman, where my reward every year was, oh, you hit your numbers, good. Well, we're going to cut your territory and double those numbers for next year. And So unfortunately, that happens to a lot of salespeople. But all right, let me swing into one final question for you. We've all been influenced by a lot of people. For me, it was the gentleman who actually gave me that quote, and it was just another speaker that I saw. But Brian Tracy's is a name that comes to mind. Just a guy that I've tried to fashion what I do around the way he's done it. How about one, maybe two people that have influenced you?
Well, in the personal world, my two kids, because as a father, they have a sort of meaning and inspiration for most of what I do in direct or indirect way. In a more professional sense, one of the people I mentioned earlier, AJ Leon, I have such mad respect for that guy. He's a real, like, if I was to define the notion of going a mile deep, it's him. And he's a hard worker, and he's someone who has spawned across different industries, tried his hands at different things, but he always takes this mile deep approach. Like, he worked hard, but he's the pure definition of whole life balance. He doesn't have work-life balance. Like, his life is one, his work, his family, his social, it's all entwined. He just approaches life as life. He goes deep with those he serves. And he could be richer than he is, I'm sure. He could have more fame and more authority and a bigger reach, but he just genuinely doesn't give a damn. He's just all about the purpose. He's all about going a mile deep. And he's someone who centers me in a massive way. And yeah, when it comes to aspiration, like, he's out there for me. He's, yeah, a truly inspiring figure for me in a big way. And yeah, honored to have him in the book. And another person who I'm really honored to have in the book, I don't know as well as AJ, but Sol Orwell, who's a Canadian entrepreneur of examine.com. And he's really similar in many ways. He's someone who just goes a mile deep, doesn't really care about outside influences, what other people think. He does what does best. And he's someone who, again, will work hard, will do what he needs to do, but it always seems to be in line with this notion of whole life balance. And something which, again, is in the book, I keep mentioning it, whole life balance. I believe the work-life balance thing is a myth. It's not real, because it tries to break your life into two, or as the case may be, into three, if you want to look at it like social life and things like that. But you only get one life. So the people who, for me, run with this notion of whole life balance, find a way to make their life just balanced as whole, their work, their everything, and it just entwines as one. And there'll be the ups and downs, the busy periods, the quieter periods, because that's life. It's a roller coaster. But the people who truly seem to live by that kind of overarching rule of whole life balance are the ones who inspire me the most. So AJ and Sol are two people who certainly come to mind.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed having you on today, folks. Beyond the Pale, Matthew Turner. Remember that book, remember that name, and most importantly, remember his message. I'm going to take that anti-hustle and really look into that. I'm going to own that one. Can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.